Good Friday, London, 3 a.m. In the Scotland Yard control room, an alarm triggers from an address in Hatton Garden, the diamond district of the British capital, a place where underground vaults hold stones worth hundreds of millions of pounds. The duty officer looked at the screen, read the signal, assigned it a priority category, low priority. No patrol car was dispatched. A single decision, 2 seconds. A finger that didn't even hover over the button, because at 3 a.m. on a holiday weekend, a tired man's brain doesn't operate on analysis, it operates on patterns. Old building, holiday weekend, false alarm. We'll deal with it later. Later is a word that, in this story, will cost anywhere from 14 to 200 million pounds, but we'll get to that. Days later, when Scotland Yard explained the incident to the press, an official spokesperson called it an error of judgment. It was arguably one of the most expensive errors of judgment in the history of British policing. Because while the duty officer was drinking tea and staring at his screen, underground, just a few blocks away, a group of men was methodically drilling through 18 inches of reinforced concrete and scooping the contents of safe deposit boxes into trash cans. Not specialized secure containers, not armored briefcases, plastic wheelie bins, the exact same kind you see outside every grocery store in London. Millions of pounds worth of diamonds rolling down the sidewalk in the same receptacle you walk past every single day. Hold on to that image. It's coming back. When employees went down into the vault the next business day and saw the aftermath, the press exploded. Headlines screamed about an elite team of international commandos carrying military-grade gear. Pundits gave interviews about highly trained professionals with special forces backgrounds. Scotland Yard stated that the heist had been planned for years using technology completely inaccessible to common criminals. But when the police actually caught the perpetrators, a wave of institutional shock rippled through their ranks. Brian Reeder was 76 years old. He commuted to the crime scene using a pensioner's Oyster card, a free public transit pass for Londoners over 60. Terry Perkins was 67, a severe diabetic. He was injecting insulin during his breaks from operating the drill. John Collins was 75. He had hearing problems, a detail that will eventually play a role in the finale of this story with a tragic comic precision that no screenwriter could have invented. The youngest member of the operation, Daniel Jones, was 58. In this crew, he was the kid. The average age of the group was nearly 69. For context, the average age of an SAS commando is 28. The average age of an MI5 operative is 34. The men the police were hunting as an elite international crew with military gear were older than the average patient in a cardiology ward. But before you laugh at the pensioners with insulin syringes, you need to understand exactly what they did. Because what they did was technically flawless. The system they hacked was designed specifically to be unhackable. And they hacked it, just not in the way its designers expected. The vault at 88 Hatton Garden had been there since the 1960s. Over the decades, it became the gold standard for secure storage for London jewelers, a place where you could leave your most valuable stones knowing they were safe. And if you look at this vault through the eyes of a security architect, every layer of defense covered a specific attack scenario, like a chessboard where every piece protects a specific square. The problem was that the chess players on the other side of the board weren't playing by the rules the architects anticipated. Subterranean location, only accessible via an elevator shaft or a staircase, both secured by electronic keypad locks. A 2-ton solid steel vault door with multiple locking mechanisms, 18-inch thick reinforced concrete walls, motion sensors inside the vault, seismic sensors designed to detect vibrations in the walls and floor, an alarm system directly linked to a security firm and the police. 7 layers, 7 independent barriers between the street and the deposit boxes. Most banks operate with 4 or 5. This vault was better protected than some military installations. And every single one of those barriers was neutralized. But not how you think. Busting through the door? Impossible. Blowing up the wall? Seismic sensors trigger instantly. Drilling the concrete? Seismic sensors again. Cutting the steel? Same thing. From the designer's perspective, this fortress had one fundamental flaw. Not a technical one, a human one. The alarm triggers, the signal goes to Scotland Yard. What happens next depends entirely on exactly how a duty officer at 3 a.m. on Good Friday evaluates the priority of that signal. In the security industry, there's a term, alarm fatigue. Studies show that if a system generates more than 5 false alarms a month, the operator automatically begins to ignore up to 80% of real signals. Not because he's bad at his job, because his brain has adapted. 4 out of 5 real threats are ignored. It's not negligence, it's neurobiology. And they banked everything on that neurobiology. The pensioners of Hatton Garden had worked in this industry for decades. They knew how jewelry security worked. They knew that the Easter holiday weekend, 4 days, Friday to Monday, was a window when the building sat empty longer than usual. They knew alarms went off for all sorts of reasons, and not every ping resulted in a patrol car pulling up at 3 a.m. on a holiday. They planned everything around that human variable, not around the technical defense systems, but around the predictability of a tired duty officer on a holiday. They didn't bet against the concrete. They bet against the cup of tea the officer drinks at 3 a.m., against the decision he makes in 2 seconds because, in his 20 years on the force, he's made it 1,000 times, and nothing has ever happened. They weren't betting on the weakness of one specific man. They were betting on the power of human habit under those exact conditions. On the night of April 3rd to 4th, 1915. Wait, that's wrong. On the night of April 3rd to 4th, 2015, the crew parked a white Mercedes van near the building on Hatton Garden. Several men got out. They unloaded items onto the sidewalk that, in the middle of the London night, attract zero attention from random passers-by. Plastic wheelie bins and some equipment in heavy cases. That is exactly what a commercial cleaning crew or a night shift construction crew looks like. That is exactly what it was supposed to look like. The best camouflage in a major city isn't invisibility. It's the mundane. You walk past a high-vis vest and a trash can without turning your head. You walk past people like this every single day. Ask yourself right now, do you remember a single janitor or construction worker you saw on the street in the last week? Exactly. They entered the building through the service entrance. No forced entry, using a key or lockpicks. The exact details of this step vary in the case files. They made it to the elevator shaft. They didn't use the elevator car. Elevators leave digital footprints in the electronic control system. Instead, they disabled the elevator mechanism and rappelled down the empty shaft. In the dark. A group of elderly men hauling heavy gear.
Think about that for a second. 76 years old, bad knees, diabetes, and you're rappelling down an elevator shaft in pitch blackness, holding onto a cable, carrying dozens of pounds of equipment. Not because you're an action hero, but because an elevator leaves a digital trace and an empty shaft doesn't. Every step of this operation wasn't fueled by adrenaline. It was cold calculation. Once at the bottom, they were on the basement level. Only a few yards of hallway, and that 2-ton steel door stood between them and the vault. They didn't attack the door. They bypassed it. Here is the moment that separates a common thug from a thinker. An ordinary burglar looks at a door and thinks, how do I open it? These men looked at the door and thought, why do we need it? The door is what the inspector looks at. The door is what you show clients so they can sleep at night. The wall next to the door is what nobody thinks about. 18 inches of reinforced concrete is just a wall, until someone decides it's a door. If the wall next to the door is also concrete, and it was, 18 inches of military-grade reinforced concrete, then you can try to go right through the wall. Not because it's easy, but because it's possible, provided you have the right equipment and enough time. And that is exactly what they had, equipment and time.
Out of the wheelie bins came a professional Hilti DD350 diamond core drill. This isn't a DIY tool you buy at Home Depot. This is industrial-grade equipment used for precision drilling through the hardest construction materials on Earth: reinforced concrete, granite foundations, metal structures. A rig that weighs nearly 100 pounds bolts directly into the floor and runs with a water cooling system. They rolled it in using plastic trash cans. The Hilti DD350 is sold over the counter, not on the black market, not through sketchy middlemen, at industrial supply stores with a warranty, an instruction manual, and home delivery. A tool capable of boring through 1.5 feet of military-grade concrete can be bought by anyone with a credit card. How many impenetrable systems in the world are designed around the arrogant assumption that certain equipment is unavailable to ordinary people? The first shift at the drill, hours of boring. The bit moves through the concrete slowly, not because it can't handle the material, but because proper diamond drilling requires patience. Push too fast, and the diamond core bit overheats. Push too hard, and the bit veers off center. It's a job that requires experience and methodical precision. They had experience. They had worked in construction and related fields for most of their long lives.
This isn't a job for the young and strong. A young, strong guy will push too hard and snap the bit. An impatient guy will crank up the RPMs and melt the rig. A guy without experience won't feel the exact moment the bit hits a steel rebar rod inside the concrete, telling him to adjust the angle slightly, ease off the pressure, and let the drill chew around the steel. Some of these guys started working with their hands in the 1950s. They were drilling concrete before Hilti even existed as a company. The first hole. The second, right next to it, overlapping the first. The third, completing the configuration. 3 overlapping holes, each about 10 inches in diameter, created a passageway in the concrete wall just large enough for a man to squeeze through. A small man. They picked the skinniest guy in the crew for this exact role. 10 inches is the diameter of a dinner plate. 3 of those circles, stacked together, create an outline that a skinny guy can barely worm his way through. Not 4 holes, not 5. 3. Minimum drilling, minimum noise, minimum time, just enough clearance. This wasn't a wild gamble, it was pre-calculated geometry. At some point in the night, investigators reconstructed that this happened at the start of their second shift because they actually visited the site twice with a rest break in between. The seismic sensors picked up the vibration. This is exactly what triggered the first alarm signal sent to Scotland Yard.
Pause on that. They came twice with a break. They showed up, worked for a few hours, packed up, left, rested, and came back. Like punching a clock, the second shift. Because it is physically impossible to core through 18 inches of reinforced concrete in one go, and they knew that in advance. They factored 2 shifts into their plan, exactly the way a foreman schedules a construction job. They weren't rushing, they were working. The duty officer looked at the screen. He saw the signal from Hatton Garden. Good Friday night, an old building with mechanical systems, a seismic sensor that could be tripping because of a passing truck or construction next door. Low priority. While he thought that, a tunnel was opening up in the vault wall. The motion sensors inside the vault were bypassed. To do this, they used sheets of plywood, leaned against the internal sensors in a way that blocked the infrared beams without triggering an alarm state. Not an electronic hack, not high-tech gear. Plywood from a hardware store. An alarm system worth tens of thousands of pounds, neutralized by material worth a few bucks.
Stop and think about the ratio. An alarm system? Tens of thousands of dollars. Design, installation, maintenance, monitoring. The material that zeroed it out? A few bucks at Home Depot. Sometimes, the most expensive solution is defeated by the absolute cheapest object. The question is, how many expensive systems in your life, locks, passwords, protocols, can be bypassed with something that costs pennies? One man squeezed through the hole in the wall. The others handed him tools and caught the contents of the deposit boxes. The boxes, small metal containers stacked in racks along the walls, were popped open with pry bars. They didn't crack all of them. The crew had limited time and limited energy. They were working in a dimly lit space through a jagged hole in the wall, and several of them were physically exhausted from hours of wrangling the drill. Brian took breaks for his bad knees. Terry shot up insulin, but they kept working. The contents of the boxes went straight into the plastic wheelie bins. Gold, diamonds, high-end jewelry, the accumulated wealth of several hundred clients. And here is where the numbers stop being just numbers and become a question of who exactly was storing valuables in those boxes and why some of them preferred to lose everything in silence rather than explain to the police what exactly they lost.
Official estimates of the stolen loot varied depending on the source and the valuation methodology. The minimum documented figure is around 14 million pounds, about $20 million. The maximum estimates, factoring in undeclared box contents, run up to 200 million. The real number is somewhere in between,
closer to the lower end based on documented claims, but with a massive, highly probable phantom volume that will never be accurately tallied. Because a portion of the vault's clients, for various reasons, had no desire to disclose exactly what they were keeping in there. For various reasons. That phrase in the investigative reports is one of the most telling details in the whole case. A private vault in the Diamond District where you don't have to file a customs declaration, where they don't ask where the stones came from, and where they don't record serial numbers. A place that exists precisely because certain people need to store certain things without answering certain questions. A fraction of the victims never filed a police report. Another fraction filed reports, but with valuations that investigators called conservative. The massive gap between 14 million and 200 million isn't a rounding error. It is the exact volume of what people preferred to keep their mouths shut about. The question the investigators asked themselves, but never said out loud: what if the true value of the heist will never be established? Not because it's impossible to calculate, but because the people who know the real number are just as interested in keeping quiet as the guys who stole it.
By dawn, they packed up the gear, loaded the wheelie bins into the van, and drove away. On the next business day, vault employees went downstairs and found the gaping hole in the wall. When Scotland Yard launched its investigation, their first public statements genuinely sounded like a description of a top-tier military-grade operation. It wasn't a deliberate lie by the detectives, it was a knee-jerk assessment based on the sheer technical quality of the execution. Everything that was done right, disabling the elevator, rappelling down the shaft, neutralizing the sensors, the choice of the drill, the coring technique, the alarm bypass tactics. Every element was methodically flawless. The execution was highly professional. Except, professionalism here didn't mean military special forces. It meant 6 decades of life spent working in construction, jewelry, and related fields, a life that gave them an intimate understanding of exactly how security systems are built and what their physical limits are. Experience beat youth, patience beat speed. Knowing the physics of concrete and the mechanics of drilling turned out to be far more valuable than any high-tech gadget.
And here is a paradox that deserves to be spoken out loud. We are used to thinking that complex systems require complex solutions, that an expensive defense can only be beaten by an expensive attack, that the only counter to engineering is more engineering. These men proved the opposite. The counter to engineering was patience. The counter to technology was physics. The counter to algorithms was knowing that the human being at 3 a.m. on a holiday will choose, "I'll check it later." The most counterintuitive part of this story isn't that they drilled through 18 inches of concrete. It's that doing so required absolutely nothing you couldn't buy at a local hardware store. The white Mercedes van. This was a mistake that is hard to explain rationally, because everything else in the operation was executed with a meticulousness that clearly showed they understood the importance of details. The van sat parked outside the building for hours in the middle of the night. The street-level CCTV cameras, which blanket central London, recorded it. Investigators tracked the license plate. The license plate led to a man connected to John Collins. London is one of the most heavily surveilled cities on Earth. There is one camera for every 11 residents. The city center is stitched together so tightly by CCTV that it is physically impossible to drive 2 blocks without ending up in frame. They knew how the vault's seismic sensors worked. They knew how a duty officer thinks on a holiday. They knew the elevator leaves a digital footprint. But they failed to account for the fact that the city itself is a surveillance system, and moreover, a system that never sleeps, never drinks tea, and never labels a signal low priority. The vault didn't catch them. They were caught by the habit of parking like normal, in a place where like normal means being recorded from 4 angles simultaneously. Surveillance was established on several members of the crew. Hidden microphones were planted in their usual hangouts. One of those spots was the Castle Pub in East London, a joint they had seemingly frequented for a significant portion of their adult lives. A familiar place, familiar faces, the beer that tastes exactly how you expect it to. Their spot, their corner, their table. Decades of the exact same routine.
Home, pub, home. The exact routine that makes a human being predictable. The exact routine they had so brilliantly weaponized against the Scotland Yard duty officer, and which the police were now brilliantly weaponizing against them. A symmetry that gives you chills. Here we need to return to a detail mentioned at the very beginning. John Collins, 75 years old, hearing problems. When people are hard of hearing, they speak louder than necessary. It's not a conscious decision. It's automatic biological compensation. If you can't hear your own voice well, your brain cranks up the volume to get the necessary feedback.
And here is what happens next. And this is the detail I asked you to remember. When one person in a group speaks loudly, everyone else unconsciously adjusts to match them. Not because they want to, because that's how group dynamics work. The brain equalizes the volume of the conversation. One guy with bad hearing turns the entire group's whispers into low voices. Low voices turn into regular conversation, and regular conversation turns into the exact decibel level perfectly captured by a hidden police microphone. A group of elderly men in a pub, one of whom was hard of hearing, and all of whom were likely adjusting their volume to his, discussing the details of the heist, just like that, in granular detail, explaining exactly how they bypassed the alarm, what they took, how they planned to fence the loot, and theorizing about why the police hadn't caught them yet. The hidden police microphones in the pub recorded every single word. A short lecture on operational security that they could have given themselves. The loudest guy in your crew is the unwitting agent of any wiretap. He doesn't know he's an agent. You don't know he's an agent, but the microphone knows.
The men who calculated 3 overlapping holes in reinforced concrete down to the fraction of an inch failed to calculate one thing, that in the pub around the corner, the physics of sound would work against them just as flawlessly as the physics of concrete had worked for them in the vault. In May 2015, just weeks after the Easter heist, the crew was arrested. At the trial, the wiretap recordings became the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. Part of the crew pleaded guilty, others went to trial. Sentences ranged from several years up to more than 7 years in prison, depending on their role in the crime. Brian Reeder, 76 at the time of the heist, was too ill to attend the trial. He was later convicted and died a few years afterward. The man who rappelled down a dark elevator shaft on ruined knees couldn't climb the stairs to the courtroom. Terry Perkins died in prison in 2018. The diabetes he had lived with for decades, shooting up insulin between shifts on the drill, between pints at the pub, between police interrogations, ultimately proved to be a far more final sentence than the one handed down by the judge.
The vast majority of the loot was never found. Diamonds are a commodity that, if necessary, is incredibly easy to make untraceable on a market where a huge portion of transactions are not documented with the rigor required to reconstruct a chain of custody. Estimates of how much value was actually recovered through confiscations vary, but no source puts the recovered fraction anywhere near half of what was stolen. The stones dissolved into the market. The people who might know exactly where they went are either dead or keeping their mouths shut. Diamonds don't have serial numbers. They don't have IP addresses. A stone sitting in a deposit box in Hatton Garden today could be sitting in a display case in Antwerp tomorrow, and not a single expert on Earth could prove it's the same stone. If the cut is slightly altered, if the certificate is reissued, and if the hands it passed through have no interest in talking. The jewelry market is not the banking system. Here, anonymity isn't a bug, it's a feature. And that is exactly why the gap between 14 million and 200 million will never be closed. How much was recovered? Fractions. And here is yet another paradox of this story. The damage was colossal, the recovery was fragmentary, and yet a portion of the victims breathed a sigh of relief when the police decided not to dig too deeply into the contents of their boxes. Sometimes, the victim of a robbery is even less interested in the investigation than the robber.
There is something here that doesn't fit neatly into the usual categories of criminal failure or criminal success. They did it. Technically, they pulled it off. They hacked a vault designed to be unhackable. They used a methodology no one anticipated when building the defense system.
They bypassed every technical element of the perimeter. And they weren't caught because the system found them. The vault system didn't find them. The white van was found via street cameras, which is routine police work, completely unrelated to the vault security. They were caught because they talked about what they did, loudly, in their usual pub. Because one of them was hard of hearing, and because, after decades of living that life, the habit of relaxing in that exact spot proved stronger than their caution. They hacked a concrete bunker, but they couldn't hack their own habits. And this is the most important takeaway of the entire story. It's not about concrete. It's not about diamonds. It's about habit. They spent months analyzing the habits of the system, the duty officer, the security firm, the rhythm of the building during a holiday. They used someone else's predictability as a weapon, and they were destroyed by their own. The Castle Pub, the same corner, the same table, the same volume, the same certainty that...
What is harder, drilling through 18 inches of concrete or changing a walking route you've taken for 40 years? The men who technically accomplished the impossible failed at the thing they did every week of their adult lives, walking into a pub and having a chat. The money they didn't have time to spend because they were arrested a few weeks later mostly vanished. Money that, objectively speaking, they wouldn't have had time to spend anyway because they were 75, 76, 67 years old, dealing with diabetes and bad knees. Not because they didn't deserve better, but because time doesn't run in reverse, and stolen diamonds do not buy you a single year of life. They hacked the system. The system hacked them back, just differently and with a different tool. There is one more detail that is rarely mentioned in retellings of this story. When the police searched Terry Perkins' house, they found a copy of the book Forensics for Dummies, with bookmarks, with notes in the margins. The man who had worked with his hands for 6 decades and knew the physics of concrete better than most engineers was trying to use a beginner's guidebook to figure out how not to leave traces. And he left every single one.
The last question I want you to ask yourself, before we get to the main one, were these men smart? Yes, when it came to the system they knew. Were they stupid? Yes, when it came to the system they were. They saw everyone else's habits, but were blind to their own. They read everyone else's patterns, but lived inside their own. A dog-eared copy of Forensics for Dummies in the house of a man who bypassed 7 layers of professional security isn't irony, it's a diagnosis. We all see the locks on other people's doors, and we completely fail to notice that our own door is wide open. And now, the ultimate question, the one the investigation never truly answered. If the police received an alarm signal at 3 a.m. on Good Friday and classified it as low priority, was that just a random mistake by a specific duty officer? Or did the crew know in advance that their signal would be classified exactly like that, which would mean they had inside information regarding Scotland Yard's internal operating protocols? And if that second option is true, then who exactly among the people supposed to be guarding the vault helped the men who robbed it?
That question hung in the air of the courtroom. It hung in the investigative reports. It hung in the corridors of Scotland Yard. And it is still hanging there today. Because if the answer is a random mistake, then this is a story about a system having a stroke of bad luck. But if the answer is they knew, then this is a story telling us that the system wasn't hacked from the outside, it was hacked from the inside. And if that's the case, the hole in the vault wall wasn't the beginning of the heist. It was the finale. And the beginning started somewhere in a quiet conversation over a pint of beer, in a pub where one guy couldn't hear well and the other was speaking a little too loudly, just in a different pub, and long before Good Friday.